With me here is Swedish journalist Ingrid Carlqvist. She joined me here in South Africa for our Boer project conference on the 30th of August here in Pretoria. She has a long experience as a journalist in the Swedish mainstream climate, worked for some of our biggest papers until she, for 10 years ago, or quite recently,
Eight.
8 years ago, joined us in the dark side of the alternative media scene and challenging this big monster of the mainstream. And that was also one of your topics in your speech at the conference.
Yeah, because you see, I've been a journalist all my life. I started in the School of Journalism when I was 18 years old. So for all my life, I worked, and I thought that everybody took journalism as serious as I have always done. I've all for me, it's always been about finding the truth, even though there is no such thing as the only truth, but to get as close to the truth as possible and to report about everything that happens. And I think maybe not all journalists in Sweden have always had that idea, but more than nowadays. And in my last job, I was in the biggest newspaper in Sweden, Aftonbladet. That was 2010, 11. And I just couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't stand all the lying and how they, twisted everything to be like immigration is wonderful, we have no problems in Sweden. So finally I just had it and I said to myself, I can't do this anymore. So I just jumped out in a world I didn't know anything about how to, because I had been a freelance journalist for many years, but suddenly when you go public with your criticism of what's going on in Sweden, the mass immigration, the multicultural fiasco, the chaos that it had created in our country, then you are a persona non grata everywhere.
Yeah, definitely.
So you're on your own.
Yeah. And I think it's an interesting discussion about this perspective of truth. And one definition that I really like is that of Dr. Jordan Peterson, that you should at least not lie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you hit the nail on that one with the Swedish media, that they are quite obviously lying when it comes to questions like this.
Mm-hmm.
But my question is, what impact have you seen that the media have on the Swedish society or society in a whole?
Mm-hmm. I would say that without the media, we wouldn't be in this situation that we are in Sweden, because most Swedes never wanted a multicultural country, but the politicians, with the help of the journalists, told us that would never happen. Sweden would always be a Swedish country. There were so few coming, it would never change our society, and a lot of people believed it. And Swedes could live relatively peacefully up until 2015, when we had this wave of 163,000 people coming in claiming to be refugees. So that filled all of Sweden with these people. And nowadays, I think there are no Swedes who haven't, had close contact with the multicultural, the criminality, the rapes, everything that is so bad about it.
Yeah. And if we're going to talk about the Swedish-South African relations in the past, in the 70s and 80s, it was a political decision to aid the ANC against apartheid, but it was the media that framed the narrative of why. Do you see the interrelations between the two?
Absolutely. And I think that, Swedes are we are very, very trusting. We live in a high trust society, one of the most high trust societies in the world. I think that will change pretty soon if we don't get rid of a lot of these people. But normally it's a good thing. We Swedes, we trust one another, we trust our politicians, and certainly we did trust the journalists. We thought that no one could be so vicious that they actually told us lies. So all the Swedes, we believed that Nelson Mandela was as close as to Christ you could come. He was the most friendly political prisoner in the world. No one told us that he was in prison for terrorism. He was like, he just wanted the blacks in South Africa to have the vote and to be free. And we believed it. And we thought that we were doing a wonderful job when we helped to free Nelson Mandela and when we helped him to become president. All Swedes were proud of this.
Yeah, the perception was, especially when Olof Palme went up public speaking about the situation in South Africa, Nelson Mandela and Robben Island. Don't think it's wrong to say that Swedes actually believed that Nelson Mandela was in prison because he was black.
Absolutely. There was no other reason. It's just a few years ago that I heard about him being a terrorist leading the armed forces of the ANC.
And this was one of your points in your speech, and you actually apologized for your previously work in the Swedish mainstream during this time.
Yeah, and you might ask, why do you apologize, Ingrid? You were not responsible, but I feel responsible. Because I was a journalist. I was 30 years old when I met Nelson Mandela in Stockholm, where he went to give a speech in front of the parliament just 1 month after he had been freed from Robben Island. And I was a journalist. I could have, checked my facts, but I just went along with this hallelujah moment that we all experienced. Wow, we the Swedes, we helped free this perfect man from prison, and now South Africa will be a wonderful place, and all the blacks that will get their land back. Now I know that's not true. It was not their land from the beginning, not the blacks that are in majority now. But I still blame myself because I've always been the person who don't go along with everybody else. When everybody runs in that direction, I always go, no, wait a minute, what's in this direction? But in this case, I didn't do it. I just ran along. I was just, filled with this feeling of, wow, we are so good. Sweden is the best country in the world, and now we will help these poor people. And so I feel angry with myself.
Yeah, this makes sense in some way. You never question what is obvious, and that was the obvious thing during that time. You've been in South Africa now for 5-6 days.
Mm-hmm.
And this is your first time here?
Yes, it is.
How do you perceive this country with your first-hand experience?
Well, I've mostly met Boers, and listening to them, I get the feeling that most Boers right now are feeling very unhappy. I hear a lot of stories about how it's very difficult to get a job, especially if you're a white man, and they don't get real jobs. They just go on contracts for 1 year at a time, which means they don't get pensions. And many people that I've have talked to, it's like they see no future. They don't know what to do with their lives. Many of them don't have any children, even though that's a disease all over the Western world. But in their case, I can really understand, do I really want to bring children into this world? What kind of future will they have? And it makes me very sad to see this, and I do want to help in any way I can. And the only way I know is to talk about it and to spread the information. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm open to everything.
No, if it was the framed narrative that made the Swedish politicians to actually aid ANC during apartheid, then I don't think it's too wrong to say that we need a new framing of narrative to direct help in this situation either.
Absolutely. And I think many Swedes, I'm not the only one who apologized actually at that speech, because I wrote on Twitter that I was going down here to ask for forgiveness. And I said, if you too want to beg for forgiveness, I can read it out. And 20 or 30 people did it, and I read some of them. So I think we could maybe start a movement in Sweden to actually help the white South Africans, because I think they need all the help they can get. And I know that many Swedes feel just like I do. We feel ashamed that we were stupid, that we didn't check our facts, that we believed everything they told us. And I think we have a debt to pay.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, and I think the Swedish awareness among the general population is on a rise.
Mm-hmm.
For me, in the Boer project, 90% it's only crowdfunded, and 90% of finance come from Swedish individuals. So we're starting to actually get somewhere.
Yeah, I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
You've done a great job, Jonas.
Oh, thank you. But you of course have lived through this struggle that they had down here in apartheid, and you do some reference to Sweden. And you see that Sweden have also changed over this period of time. Mm-hmm. And you label this on the title of your recently released book,
Yeah.
Sweden.
From Sweden to Absurdistan.
Yeah, and you actually got a good laugh at that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a bit surprised because I've been living with this word for so many years now. Absurdistan. That's what I call Sweden because it's become so absurd to live there. And it's like one of these Pakistan and Uzbekistan, all these kind of countries. But they laughed because I think it was the first time they heard the expression. So that was fine. But I wrote this book because what has happened to Sweden since we had all this, ANC helping Nelson Mandela and all this, Sweden has become a totally changed country. Up until the 70s, we were the most homogeneous country in Europe. We had never had more than 1% foreign born in Sweden, and now we have 30% with some kind of foreign background. It is unimaginable. Yeah. How did this happen? And how did we not see that it was happening?
And it's quite interesting because this ties up our two project, if I'm going to call your book project, because that happened during exactly the same time when we expressed our support for the ANC. So to be fair in some way of our support to the Rainbow Nation here in South Africa is that we actually implemented the same kind of policies on ourselves, and now we are suffering the consequences of them, not as severely as they do here in South Africa, but we see the future is not far off.
And maybe they are connected to each other, because I've always said that Swedes are very nationalistic. Most people don't believe that, but I say we have a titanic nationalism. We believe we are so sure we are the best in the world. So how could anything hurt us? I mean, if people come here, they will become just like us because we are so nice, we are so good. And I don't think that we really wanted to change Sweden into this rainbow nation. I thought we just didn't believe it could ever happen. No. When it came to South Africa, we really believed that the whites were horrible. I don't think that we believed that we were horrible, because that's not the Swedish national identity. We believe we are so nice and we can make a change everywhere in the world. And I really hope that we can get rid of that national identity, because it's brought us and South Africa a lot of trouble.
Yeah, it's an extreme virtue signal gone extremely wild. And one thing that I find quite interesting during that time, as you said, that Sweden were very homogeneous back in the 70s. Like in the 60s, it was more or less 100% Swedes living in that country. But still, we thought that we had the answer for a multicultural society down here in South Africa.
Yeah, it's about that national identity. And I talked about it in my speech that in the 1600s, when we had the Swedish Empire, we were like a military superpower, and I think that created that national identity, that we believe that if we can't rule everything, at least we must have a say in all matters all over the world. And since we are not a military superpower anymore, we can be a humanitarian superpower. But it has nothing to do with humanity. I think actually it's the other way around. What we call humanitarian is not humanitarian at all. Not against South Africans, not against Swedes, and not against the people that we have brought to our country. Most of them don't want to stay in Sweden. We have lured them to come there with, big benefits, and you never have to work in all your life. You just go on welfare. And I don't think that's a good situation for anyone.
No, and this humanitarian label or semi-communism or whatever we want to call it has all fall under the mantra of everyone's equal worth, which is also the title of the documentary that we presented at this conference. And I think, can you just tell us and the audience about
equal worth.
Yeah, what it really means in the Swedish context.
Yeah, I will try to explain it, but it's difficult because I think you have to be Swede to understand it. Actually, it's from a mistranslation of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, where they talk about that when you are born, we are born with equal dignity. It's dignity in English and dignité in French. But when they translated it into Swedish, it should have been värdighet, but they which means dignity, but they chose the word worth. So
Which in Swedish is värde. So,
värde,
which is close to värdighet. Yeah.
So, and you know, it's really done something with the Swedish brains, because we think that since everybody has equal worth, and it's very important to say that, it's like you are confessing your values, your religion. I believe in everybody's equal worth. It's the mantra in Sweden. And if you say like I do, everybody doesn't have equal worth. What kind of rubbish is that?
Yeah.
You don't think that the neighbor's children are as much worth to you as your own children. But we do have Swedes nowadays who say, yes, they do. Yes, they do. Everybody has equal worth. And it's done something to our brains, and I really hope there is an antidote to this, because it's ruining our country.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to understand that the left is working with buzzwords to stop political discourse, like referring to the immigration policies, and you could be labeled a racist. But this mantra is beyond that. It's not just to stop the conversation. It's almost sectarian in how it's being presented, just being constantly repetitive.
Yeah, and I think I don't know yet if someone has been fined or thrown into prison for claiming that everybody do not have equal worth, but it's made a lot of Swedes believe that the Swedes don't have any special rights to Sweden. All people all over the world have the same right, equal rights to live in Sweden. Even if they've never paid taxes here, they have the right to live off of our tax money. And it's made people sick.
Yeah.
And I really hope, we have election in a week, and I really hope we will see a landslide there where all the established parties will go down and the two nationalistic parties that we have will rise. And because we need to change this, we need to help the Swedes to sober up from this, I don't know what to call it, but
but I think this is a good conversation to actually end this interview, because it will tie up with the first one, and that is that we go into an election now on Sunday, on the 9th of September, and it's the political opposition, which we of course support with the Swedish Democrats and Alternative for Sweden. But it is just as much a measure of between the established media in the mainstream and the alternative media on the rise, of how much influence our media channels actually have. Because the mainstream media, of course, doesn't give any coverage at all to our choice of parties.
No, and very interesting things have been happening in Sweden in the last 6 months or so since this new party, Alternative Sweden, started. And we see that alternative media sites, many of them have more readers and listeners and viewers than mainstream media has. So, we are in a shift here. And I do believe that the new parties, the alternative media, will grow and grow. And I think this is part of the Swedish recovery, because we really need that.
Yeah, and one shouldn't fool yourself that it's the media platform you're reading. These days you're actually reading articles that's being spread through other means. I don't, like when you were working at Aftonbladet or a big mainstream media paper, you went to the store and you bought that paper and you got the selection of the articles that editor staff wanted you to read. But now you read one article from that paper, another article from that, so it's a different dynamic, and in that dynamic mix, we in the alternative media channels is winning big time against these old giants.
Yeah, and I saw a video clip yesterday where a Swede who talked about the information, the civil war of information. Yeah. And I think that's a good word, because it really is a civil war. Who do you believe? Who can reach the hearts and minds of the Swedes? And I think that we are on the winning team, because people are so fed up, they're so angry with the journalists. And really, I am a journalist and I really love journalism. I think that's one of the most important professions in the world, because you can really make a change if you use it, but you have to use it in a correct way. And when I say I'm a journalist, people say, oh, you're a journalist. Oh, and that's when I started as a journalist, people say, oh, you're a journalist. Yeah. That's so interesting. Please tell me more about it. And sometimes I thought that maybe I should stop calling myself a journalist.
Whenever someone calls me a journalist, my reply is, I'm not a journalist, but maybe I am what a journalist should have been.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting. It's like when they do the polls of like what kind of credibility different profession has, journalist and politician is the lowest.
The lowest.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I really want to, you know, to make journalism great again.
Yeah.
And I mean, you and I think we should claim that word. It's like there's nothing wrong with journalism. It's what's wrong is how the Swedish journalists and many mainstream media journalists all over the Western world, they are not doing what they should do. They have become megaphones for the power. It's propaganda. It's not journalism anymore. But journalism is still good and important.
Yeah. Do you know what journalist work you will do tonight?
No.
I signed you up on a night patrol with the AfriForum night patrol unit. So you will be going around in the forums with some of the AfriForum guys.
Wow, that's interesting. You're full of surprises. Yeah, no, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so grateful that you took me with you so that I can myself do something to write about it and do these stories that I think that many Swedes are really longing to read about it.
And of course, most of your work is in Swedish, but most of my audience is Swedish as well. So maybe you could just state where people can follow you if they are not already aware.
Yeah, they can follow me on Twitter at Ingrid Carlqvist. You can put it up. So, I mean, it's not easy for you to hear how to spell it.
Yeah.
And I'm on Facebook. You can follow me there. And I have this website, ingridandmaria.se, but it's and in Swedish, och. Yeah. But we mostly write in Swedish, but these stories that I have been doing here, I will really try to translate them into English, because I really want the whole world to see what's happening here.
Yeah, and I will put the links in the description below here.
Great.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining me here.
Thank you, Jonas.
Yeah.